Welcome to Fast to Heal Stories, Sarah. We are so excited to have you today. This is a topic I think most people are going to listen to this and say, what in the heck is that? And they're going to learn a whole lot. And that's why I know I brought you on the podcast, because when I heard you talk on another episode, another interview, I was like, I've never heard of this, but it makes so much sense. So we're going to be talking about gray area drinking today, and how that relates to so many different aspects of our life. So very honored to have you here. I know you are going to teach people a lot today in the next hour. So welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And as you can hear, Sarah is not from the United States. She is in Australia. We'll let her give you her backstory, but it's nighttime for me and bright and early in the morning for her. So it is really cool to be able to connect with her way on the other side of the world in a different hemisphere. It's my winter, it's her summer, and it's so cool to be able to do this interview and connect with you. So give us your backstory and how you even got into this whole gray area drinking thing. And we'll jump into that, and we'll look and, we'll go more specifically what that means and how you know if this is you. But give us your backstory and how you even got involved with this.
Yeah. So I think maybe let's just do a little bit of, if it's okay, of an explanation of what grey area drinking is, because I think it helps explain my story a little bit and helps to set some context around this. So up until recently, the conversation about alcohol has been you're an alcoholic or you're not. And let me ask you this, Shana. So if I ask you to describe an alcoholic, what's the first image that comes into your mind?
I would think of somebody who would wake up looking super hungover and be reaching for alcohol within the first couple of hours that they're up. Otherwise, they're into withdrawal symptoms, is how I would picture an alcoholic.
Yeah. And I ask this question to so many people, and this is exactly it. We've got this preconception, which I think has been created by society, by culture, by films, movies, TV shows, that we go, if you're an alcoholic, you wake up with shaking hands, you have to drink in the morning, and you're probably in that area of society where maybe you've lost your home, you've lost your job, you might have been kicked out of your family, you might have lost your driving license. Like, it's a real kind of down and out type thing. And so if you are a really big drinker, but you don't drink in the morning, you still have a really, you still have your job, you still have your home, you still have your family, then what are you? Because I never identified as being an alcoholic, and that's what kept me stuck for so long. And I will never use that term alcoholic because there are so many connotations to it. But we can still have a problem with alcohol and not be an alcoholic. And that's kind of where the term grey area drinking comes in, is if you think about a scale of 1 to 10, right? So you think about, and this is just a really way of kind of explaining grey area drinking. 1 is someone who rarely drinks, or maybe they have a glass of champagne at a wedding, they toast the bride and groom, and other than that, alcohol just does not feature in their life whatsoever. 10 is what you've just described. So someone who wakes up in the morning, if they don't drink within a couple of hours, they'll probably go into withdrawal, and they need to have medical support to stop drinking, because alcohol is one of a few substances, only 2 or 3 substances, that the body can actually die from the physical withdrawal from alcohol. So that's a 1 and a 10. Not many people fit in a 1 or a 10 category. And you don't wake up one day a 1 and wake up the next day a 10. It's a scale, it's a gradient, and you go gradually up that scale. And I consider grey area drinking to be about a 4 to an 8 on that scale. So we've got to the point where we're not a take it or leave it drinker. We're using alcohol perhaps as a crutch in some way. We're making rules around our drinking. Alcohol, we have a relationship with alcohol. It's not just something we don't think about and then we either have it or we don't. We've got self-talk about it. Oh, am I going to drink tonight? Should I drink tonight? I said I wasn't going to drink tonight, but I feel really like I'd quite like a drink tonight. So maybe if I have one tonight and I won't have one tomorrow, like that constant chatter where we're justifying our drinking. We wake up in the morning, usually with regret, going, Oh, that was not what I intended to do last night. I thought I'd only have one glass. I can't believe I've drank the bottle. I feel like crap. I've got a whole day to go through today. How am I going to do it? And then by 5 o'clock, we're pouring a glass of wine to take the edge off from the way that we're feeling caused by the alcohol we had the night before. And then we have that vicious cycle. But we're still high functioning. We don't call in sick. We're not having to lie in bed all day. We're raising kids. We're going to work. We're going to the gym. We're running marathons, for God's sake. Like all of these things that we are high functioning and we're doing, but we're also drinking at a level that is not take it or leave it. I'm not sure what the units are in America. Do you know what the recommended units are per week of alcohol?
For drinks for men
Yeah.
and women. Currently, I believe it's 1 to 2 drinks per week is looked at as totally fine, and even like a drink a day. I know that some, depending on, what group you're looking at, but up to 1 per day is completely permissible, 1 to 2, because it is a blood thinner and can actually be helpful. Or looking at the different type of alcohol, if it's a wine that has, some other health benefits.
Yeah.
So it's kind of dependent on what it is. But yeah, some circles, some say 1 to 2 a day, and some are more like 1 to 2 a week.
Yeah. So in Australia, it's 10 units a week. And they
Yeah.
say that is the recommended amount of alcohol. But I would say most people are drinking a lot more than that. But like there can be 10 units in one bottle of wine, depending on how much of the content, the alcohol content of the wine. So this just starts to set the scene a little bit in terms of grey area drinking, where we're still maintaining our life at the level that is expected of us. On the outside, it's kind of like, no problem here, nothing to see here, it's all fine. But on the inside, we are drinking at a level that is becoming problematic. Like, how do we know it's a problem? Well, if you've ever said to yourself, I'm not drinking tonight, but then you do drink. If you've ever said to yourself, I'm only having one, and you finish the bottle. If you find yourself making rules around your drinking and breaking them, if you find that the moment you feel any kind of uncomfortable emotion, the first thought you have is, oh, I need a glass of wine. Like those, that when alcohol becomes a crutch. And I mean, I think that most mums groups, we kind of feed that message, right? I can't think of any WhatsApp group that I'm not in where it wouldn't have been uncommon if the moment you say, oh my God, the kids are driving me mad, or my husband's doing my head in, the immediate response will be, well, go and pour yourself a glass of wine. Like we are normalizing drinking. We've normalized alcohol consumption to be at the level that it is, and that's become problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the mommy wine culture is definitely endorsed, and you see it all over television, you see it on social. And I know for me personally, I've never been well, I shouldn't say that. In college, I did my fair share of drinking and partying, that's for sure. More into adulthood, not as much, and I rarely drink now, but you find yourself with certain people or in certain circles or in certain environments, and you almost are looked at strangely if you don't have a drink. And I live in Wisconsin, and this is like, we are known for beer and cheese. So it's like beer. I mean, we have breweries everywhere in Wisconsin, and the college culture for sure is just like Partyville. And when I went to 2 different colleges in Wisconsin, and both of them, it's like that's just what you did on the weekends. And it wasn't like you just had a couple of drinks. I mean, you were going to house parties and drinking, buying your $3 to $5 cup and drinking as much as you possibly could in that time span. And like you said, going home, feeling like crap, getting up the next day, regretting your choices. But yeah, it's definitely fed culturally for sure, which is a huge problem. Yeah. So take us back to your story, and, how did you even find out about gray area drinking? Like, I didn't know that was even a coined term. And how did you say, oh my gosh, like, this is me. this is my issue, and I need to change.
So my drinking started like most people in the late 80s in Northern England, which was kind of age 14, filling up your the soda stream bottle with whatever you could find in your parents' drinks cabinet, with a mix of like Cinzano and whiskey and Bacardi and Malibu, and just mix them all together, add a bit of Coke, go down the local park, and get drunk. And that was kind of my initiation. It never occurred to me at any point in my teenage years that I wouldn't drink. I grew up in a house where alcohol was very prevalent, not in any kind of negative way. And so for me growing up, all I saw, my parents were very social. They constantly had dinner parties, and all I would hear was raucous laughter coming from these parties with adults that were drinking wine and whiskey, and all seemed to be having a great time. And so for me, it just was like, well, yeah, I want to have a bit of that. So it never occurred to me that I wouldn't drink. It was just modeled to me that was what you did when you got older. I think the more sinister side for me was that by the time I was 13, I'd been to 5 different schools. We'd moved around a bit with my dad's job, and there was definitely a sense of wanting deep connection, like having to always be the new girl, always having to fit in, always having to try and forge friendships. And something I discovered very quickly with alcohol was that it's brilliant at creating fast-tracked connection with particularly other women. Like I craved female company. I'm a girl's girl. I loved having friends around me. Like that was always stuff that I wanted. And so when I discovered alcohol, it was like, this is how you create connections really quickly. You just get drunk with people, and then within 2 hours, you're my best friend. I love you. And that was music to my ears. That was all I ever wanted. And so I very quickly learned, when you get drunk, you create you fast track the making friends process. It's a quick way to feel accepted, like you fit in, like you're part of the gang. And I love that. So that followed me for most of my life, up until recently. How do you make friends? You get drunk with people. So I went to uni, and Freshers Week in uni, a bit the same for you guys in the States. You just get drunk, right? And so that was brilliant. And then I moved to London. My first job was working for a recruitment firm, and the 4th stage of the interview process was going to the pub and downing shots to see how well you could handle your booze. So needless to say, I passed with flying colours, and that was the job for me. So again, this was how you make friends. Was again, like, it was a young person's company. I think there was 200 of us, all under the age of 25. It was just like, it was an extension of university, but you had to do work in the day, and then you'd just go to the pub every night of the week. So again, drinking a lot, making friends using alcohol. And I always wore my drinking as like a badge of honor. I was really proud that I could match the boys pint for pint down the pub. I had a huge capacity for alcohol. It didn't make me fall over and pass out. It just heightened the way that I felt. It made me more energized. It made me lit up. It made me have the life and soul of the party. And I loved that. That was what I craved from it. And this was the era as well of, Sex and the City. And we were watching Samantha sleeping her way around New York with a Cosmopolitan in hand, girl power, we can have it all. And so we had these role models that were like, no, we don't have to stay behind the boys anymore. We can make our own money. We can drink our booze. We can, we can do what we want. And I was definitely in a generation of women that were doing that. I went traveling around the world, which was, again, another year of just, as you can imagine, making friends through alcohol. And so there was a lot of boozing. Met my husband, who's from New Zealand, and we went back to the UK, and we kind of settled down a bit, but not really. We didn't want to be grown-ups. We kind of wanted to hold on to our youth. And so by this point, we're in our early 30s, and we're still burning the candle at both ends. By this point, I had a really successful career, but there was lots of drinking. And then we got married, and I wanted to fall pregnant, and I just couldn't. It just wasn't happening. I was doing everything apart from probably the one thing that was actually causing the problem. So I was sticking needles in my tummy. I was boiling up weird herbs and teas to stimulate my hormones. I was lying with legs up the wall for hours after having sex to make sure that I would get pregnant, doing all of those things, but I wasn't not drinking. And 2 years of trying to conceive. I think I lied at every doctor's appointment about how much I drink. But I also think I was in denial. I don't think that we really understand when we're pouring our own drinks and when we're going on nights out where you're losing count of how much you're drinking. But, you know, I would be drinking half a bottle of wine before I even went out. And then I would be out for 5 or 6 hours just drinking. And so there was a lot of units there. But of course, you're in your 30s, you're young, free and single type thing. You don't have responsibilities. It never occurred to me to start going, how much do I drink? I must start counting my units, you know. Anyway, eventually we had fertility treatment and I did fall pregnant and just didn't have an issue with not drinking. It was just kind of like, okay, so maybe that's my line in the sand. I was a boozer. Never caused me problems, wasn't something I did on my own at home. It was something I did to socialize. I just loved socializing. I got pregnant, didn't drink, had a baby. And after 2 months, I was back in the pub drinking at a really significant level. And I remember thinking, so it hasn't changed. So I am drinking. That part of me is still there. This is interesting, but didn't really think that much of it. So my drinking then changed after having my son. We would go to, you know, you're not doing the big late nights out because of course you can't. So there would be lunches at friends' houses that would just start at lunchtime and you'd be home by 8 p.m. absolutely, you know, smashed. And I had this nagging feeling that this was not what I wanted, but I didn't know any different. Like my whole life, my social life had never involved not drinking. Like when I was pregnant, I can't really explain it, but there was not a desire to drink. I still saw my friends, but it was like I was so deliriously happy that I'd got pregnant. And I wanted to be the best mum and everything, that it didn't occur to me to even drink or want to drink. But as soon as I'd had that baby and I wasn't pregnant anymore, and I started socializing again and people were drinking around me and there was no reason not to drink, I drank. And then we made the decision to move to Australia and my son was 9 months old. And looking back, that was a kind of pivotal time in the decline of my mental well-being. What I probably thought was just going to be this hugely exciting adventure was all of that, but I definitely underestimated the impact it was going to have on my mental well-being to make a move to the other side of the world, where suddenly you're without your family, without your friends, without your support network. I had a 9-month-old and I fell pregnant again straight away as soon as we got here. And so very quickly I had 2 under 2. I wasn't working and my whole identity previously had been with this brilliant career that I'd had in London, where I'd worked my way up to being a director and we did weekends in New York and weekends in Saint-Tropez and the best dinners in London, you know, and I had a great group of girlfriends and my life was like, it was brilliant. And then I had children and my life was brilliant in a different way, but nothing had prepared me for how that was going to be. And then throw in the mix that I'd moved to the other side of the world and I had no friends and I had no family and I'd lost my support network. I wasn't working anymore, so my sense of identity had gone. And going back to what I said at the start, I didn't have alcohol as my crutch to make friends anymore, although I was trying to use it. So I'd be going to these mothers group meetings and kind of like, oh, who wants to go and get smashed tonight and leave the kids at home with the dads? And they'd all be looking at me like, no, I don't want to do that. And I just couldn't understand it because I was just like, that's how I'm supposed to make friends. How do I make friends if it's not bonding over a bottle of wine and a cheeky fag? And so it was a challenging time. And then I started going, well, why does nobody like me? Why does no one want to spend time with me? And of course, it wasn't that they didn't like me. It was simply that they didn't want to go and get absolutely smashed. But I didn't know any other way to make friends. I've just never done it any other way before. And so then my drinking escalated and was something I was doing more and more at home on my own. It hadn't been before, but it was something that I was lonely, I was tired, I was confused, I was homesick, and they're not nice emotions to have to sit with. And so alcohol became a brilliant friend to make them all go away. But the problem with alcohol is it's highly addictive and we build up tolerance. So what starts as a glass or two very quickly becomes the bottle. And I had very strict rules. I didn't drink on Mondays and Tuesdays. But generally speaking, I was so hungover on Mondays and Tuesdays that I didn't want to drink because I would just write myself off at the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, fast forward a few years and the drinking had got quite significant. I'd gone to my GP at one point and said, I'm not sleeping, I've got chronic anxiety, like all these things that never used to bother me, they're really bothering me. I lie in bed just worrying about things all the time. And of course, now I know that drinking at the level that I was, it leads to anxiety. Alcohol causes anxiety. And yet for so many of us, we're using alcohol to relieve anxiety without knowing what it does to us on a neurological perspective. So the GP had given me a prescription for anti-anxiety meds, but I didn't take them. And I just on a whim decided I'm going to do 21 days off alcohol. That's what I'm going to do. I'm feeling a bit bloated, a bit overweight, a bit tired. I just need to take a break from booze. So this was back in 2017. And so I did 21 days and I was like, oh my goodness, this is what it's like to wake up every day with energy and to feel positive and to sleep really well and to not have anxiety and hate myself every morning for the amount I drank the night before. And it was just like I'd been let into this whole new world. And so I kept going and I got to 100 days. And then I was like, okay, I'm fixed now. I can't have a problem anymore because I've just done 100 days off. So I decided I'll be a moderate drinker now. So now I'll be someone that can just have one or two and just be fine with that. So I decided to go back to drinking, and within a month I was back to drinking the same amount as I had been before. And so what followed was 2 years of trying to moderate, taking breaks, going back to drinking, binge drinking, and being trapped in this cycle until finally I just kind of said to myself, you know what, Sarah, everything in your life is better when you don't drink. Your relationships, your mood, your mental well-being, your physical health, your sleep, your energy, everything is better. So why do you keep going back to the one thing that completely ruins all of that? And so I made that decision April 2019, and I had my last drink.
So it's been April 19th of what year was that?
Sorry, April 2019. So just coming up to 4 years.
That's awesome. So many things in your story. First of all, it's so relatable to so many women. I'm sure there are many, I mean, not women and men who are listening to this and like, oh, that's me. And I definitely had my own issues with alcohol early on, like I said, when it was more cultural and in college and early 20s. And my relationship with alcohol has changed significantly. Like I would say I'm now more like, if we go back to that spectrum of alcohol, and one being, you can just have a drink at a wedding, and 10 being like falling down drunk, I would probably be a 2 or 3. Like I really see myself as like, I don't care if never, if I'm home, I've never would think about like, oh, I want a glass of wine. Like if I'm home by myself or I'm with my kids, it never even crosses my mind like, oh, I just want to have a drink. I've not always been like that, but now like the past several years, I just don't care. And it's funny how you talk about the rules around it, because when you're pregnant, it's like, it's just off. It's just no. It's just like, there's no, there's not that gray. There's not that, oh, can I, it's just the rules are rules, and it's no, and it's gray, it's black or white. And it's relieving, it's like a relief, like, oh, I can't drink. Like, I'm just going to be the designated driver. And I remember like you, like I never had any issues with not drinking when I was pregnant. Like we have 3 kids. I'm like, I could give a crap if I drink. It's like not like I was craving it, but it was nice to have those rules in place. And then Just this year, I did, like so many people do, dry January, and my birthday's in January, and I had tried it the year before, but when it got to my birthday, I'm like, I'm just gonna have a glass of wine. Where this year, I was like not tempted by it at all, and here it is 6 weeks later, 6, 7 weeks later, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I just don't care. And like you said, like I feel better, I sleep better. It's all for me, it's just the people I'm with and the environment. It's like certain people you feel like you need to have a drink, but if I'm not with those people, I wouldn't care. But one other thing that when you were talking about, you're planning a pregnancy, and please know there's no judgment here, but you almost wonder if, when you were drinking heavily, if your body, if you ever had any like spontaneous abortions in there where your body was just like, like even if
Yeah.
you conceived, like
Yeah.
this body is not healthy enough. And you wonder if, women are running into that if they are drinking a large amount. But yeah, thanks for sharing your story. And I know that it is not easy to do, but it's very, very relatable. But yeah, so the gray area is more like that 4 to 8, having the rules around it, feeling like telling yourself like, I can do this, I can be a moderate drinker, and then losing control. I want to talk a little bit about like bring the health aspect of this in, just because so many of my listeners are trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, heart issues, cholesterol issues, insulin resistance. How does alcohol factor in with that? Because like we talked about before, it's like we've got this mommy wine culture where, it's like you get home from a hard day of work and you just pop open a bottle of wine, or you go out with a friend, or you go out for happy hour or whatever. And it's like I tell my students, alcohol is a poison, like we talked about. You can't store it. So your body needs to break it down immediately. Like there's a priority sequence, and alcohol is the first thing that it needs to get rid of. So it's basically going to turn off fat burn. Like you're not going to be burning fat, and you're not going to be burning fuel well if you have alcohol in your system. So are there any other things health-wise for women to think about, especially when they're having weight loss resistance, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and then just the overall inflammation? What are some things to think about with alcohol with that? And, is there, we kind of talked about limits, but is it like, oh, 1 glass is okay and 10 is not? I think there's a lot of students I work with that in their head, they have a set limit where this much is okay, but if I pass that, then it's not. But can you speak to that topic a little bit?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would talk about on the physical side of alcohol is there's a hell of a lot of sugar in wine, especially. So a bottle of wine can have as much as 69 grams of sugar. So we need to remember as well that that there's a lot of sugar in, and so for the type 2 diabetes, for insulin resistance. And it's so what I find astonishing but not surprising, because of course big alcohol is a huge money-making machine, is that they've twigged that lots of women have stopped drinking as much because of the calories and the sugar content in wine. So they've created, I was reading about a drink in the States called, I think it's called Skinny Girl or something like that, which is a vodka and soda, so that you can still have alcohol but not have calories. Like the marketing of big alcohol is incredible in trying to ensure that we still keep drinking no matter what. But you're right, in terms, it doesn't matter if it's the sugar, obviously the huge sugar content of wine and champagne. But also the alcohol content in terms of the liver. When the liver is having to process alcohol, it can't be doing anything else. There's a few other things to really bear in mind, particularly for women. Would you say that most of your listeners are women?
Yeah, I would say about 90% of my following in general is women.
So the first thing is that women are more prone to the physical impact of alcohol than men. So we will become addicted to alcohol quicker. We experience liver disease quicker. We experience heart disease and stroke caused by alcohol quicker. And there's a few reasons for that. So the first reason is that we actually produce less of the enzyme that breaks down alcohol. Women just do not produce it as much. So men have a higher number of the higher amount of an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, which is what breaks down alcohol quickly and stops it getting into the bloodstream. Women have less of that. So that means more alcohol gets into our bloodstream. So automatically we are facing more alcohol in our bloodstream that the body has to deal with, which is why we become impacted by health conditions caused by alcohol much quicker than men. Second reason is, generally speaking, women are designed to have a body that has more body fat than men because we carry babies. And so as a result of that, our body generally has less water. Water dilutes alcohol. So again, men dilute alcohol a hell of a lot quicker than women do. So they've got that advantage. The third thing is that we have hormone cycles. And when we are at a stage in the month where our estrogen is higher, we become more intoxicated by alcohol than when it's lower. So this is why there will be some times when you could have a couple of glasses and go, oh my God, that really affected me last night. I woke up, like it really impacted me. Or I woke up and I've got a really bad hangover, but I hardly drank anything. And that's because at different times of the month, when your estrogen's higher, the alcohol impacts you more significantly than when the estrogen is not higher. Now, the other thing, it's really important for me to share, and this isn't to scaremonger, this is to share facts, which is the astonishing link between alcohol and breast cancer. And they're now saying in Australia, it's 1 in 5. So 1 in 5 breast cancer diagnoses is directly caused by alcohol.
Wow.
1 in 5. And there's a few reasons for this, which I'm not a scientist, but the main thing is that we have circulating estrogen in our body. When our liver is which has to be metabolized by the liver. When our liver is constantly having to deal with alcohol, it prioritizes alcohol over estrogen because estrogen, it knows that because it's been made in its body, whereas alcohol is this foreign substance that's come in and it wants to metabolize it as quick as possible. If we're drinking most days of the week, it takes up to 72 hours for alcohol to leave the system. If we're drinking most days of the week, our liver is constantly having to break down that alcohol, so it doesn't even get a chance of getting to the estrogen. And if we don't have a chance of getting to the estrogen, then that's where we get estrogen dominance. And I also read somewhere that when we drink alcohol, we increase the circulating estrogen in the bloodstream by up to 200%. And this is where hormone-related cancers come from. And so this is why there is such a link between alcohol and breast cancer. There was a podcast I listened to the other day that said for every 10 grams of alcohol that we consume, now 10 grams is a very small glass of wine, we increase our chance of cancer by between 4 and 13%.
Wow.
Alcohol directly causes 7 types of cancer. So the other thing to bear in mind for any of your women that are in those menopause years, anything from kind of late 30s onwards, is that alcohol plays a massive impact on our sleep. So I'm perimenopausal, I'm 46, and I have, fluctuating hormones all the time. The best thing that we can do for ourselves is remove alcohol and remove processed foods and sugar during this time, because otherwise our symptoms are so much worse. I was also reading something the other day that was talking about, alcohol impacts our sleep so much, and that's why, so it will help us pass out, but usually we'll wake up about 5 hours later, which is usually around that 2-3 a.m. and then we really struggle to get back to sleep. So when we drink alcohol, we get a huge surge of GABA. GABA is the neurotransmitter that makes us feel calm and relaxed. The brain can't bear this lack of balance in the brain, where we've had a huge surge of one neurotransmitter. It wants everything to be at exactly the homeostasis, balanced level of everything. So it secretes cortisol, which is the opposite of GABA, to just get things back in balance. The alcohol wears off, and then we have this excess cortisol, the stress hormone, which is circulating around the body. This is what causes us to wake up a few hours after drinking and not be able to get back to sleep. And this is what causes anxiety. So for so many of us, finding other ways to support our sleep. And the other thing to bear in mind is as we get to our late 30s onwards, we stop producing as much progesterone. Progesterone is the hormone that makes us feel calm and relaxed. And this is why we'll have increased anxiety and why so many women turn to alcohol, because they're calm, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. And that one evening glass of wine, it's being bombarded at us left, right, and center from all the marketing companies. You deserve it. Have a glass of wine. Here's your reward. You've worked hard. And we don't need anyone telling us twice that we've had a hard day and we justify some kind of, switch off. But the problem is that what starts as an innocent glass of wine generally becomes more, because we build tolerance and we're not getting that same high from it. And so we need to start thinking about what are the other ways that we're going to support ourselves to manage our stress, to feel less overwhelmed, and to support ourselves through what can be quite difficult years. In our midlife, we are usually raising kids, caring for elderly parents, we're working, we've got pressure to look good, to be going to the gym, to be making home cooked meals, to be raising kids that are not on devices all the time, to be spending time with them. Like, the pressure that we feel day in, day out is relentless, and alcohol just switches it all off for a really short time. So that's why we're doing it. But the problem is, it then becomes a problem.
So interesting. I know I was one of those people always who, no matter what time I fell asleep, if I had been drinking, I would wake up. If I had drank too much, I would wake up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and just lay there and feel like absolute garbage. And then my husband would just keep sleeping. I was like, oh, and then you have little kids and it was so not worth it. But even now, if I just drink like a drink or two, even if it's in the afternoon, it messes with my sleep. Like, I wear an Oura ring and my deep sleep is compromised. I don't sleep as soundly. I don't sleep as long. And yeah, it's just not worth it. And I know of so many women who have said, like, yeah, I can't, like, if I even drink one glass of wine, I have hot flashes. And for all of the reasons, and if they're in the perimenopause to menopausal years, it exacerbates things so much. And those hot flashes are there, and they just can't, perimenopause is 10 times worse if they're drinking. And like you said, it's like a lot of them are having trouble falling asleep, so they want to take the edge off. But that was such a great explanation with why we're waking up in the middle of the night, why we're not going back to sleep, and why, it's like you think that it's reducing anxiety, but in the long run, it's not. Is alcohol dehydrogenase, is that something that you can supplement with? Because I know a lot of enzymes you can supplement with, but is that one that the body has to make on its own? Okay. Yeah. It's not something, because I'm like, wow, if that were true, you think you could just take that and you can get through, break down that alcohol so much quicker. And I'm curious too, with the estrogen dominance, that all makes sense when you think about it. And yeah, there's like 3 different phases of having to recirculate the estrogen and get rid of it, and that all happens in the liver. But is the estrogen dominance true for men too? If they're drinking too much, do they have, men don't have as much estrogen as women, obviously, but did they struggle with estrogen dominance?
Absolutely. Okay. And that's why you see, it's diet in any way. So anything that you're consuming as well that's higher in sugar and beer and wine, etc. But yeah, men do produce estrogen, and it still has to be metabolized by the liver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, we see the classic beer belly, but the man boobs, all of that, that's
man boobs, yeah,
all driven by alcohol intake as well. So it gives them incentive to rethink, how much they're drinking. So yeah, I really wanted to talk about the perimenopause and the menopause and how alcohol is exacerbating that for sure. And then we did go through how we think that it's reducing our attention or our anxiety, but it's really not. Was there anything else that we missed with the whole perimenopause and our age group of women? I think you covered it all. Was there anything else that we didn't hit in those topics? Those are 2 things that I really wanted to make sure we covered.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Oh, the only other thing I was going to talk about was gut health. So alcohol is the #1 cause of leaky gut, which makes sense because alcohol is essentially petrol. So of course it destroys the gut lining. And alcohol, so if you've got leaky gut, that's what causes inflammation. So that's number one. And number two is alcohol feeds the bad bacteria in our gut because of the sugar content as well. And so if we want to create a healthier gut, then, something I get all of my clients to do once they remove alcohol is, really starting to add in that fermented food, the sauerkraut, the kimchi, the kefir. Let's really start rebuilding that good gut, healthy gut, because it's incredible what alcohol does to the gut.
Yeah, because when I think about gut destroyers and leaky gut, I think gluten, soy, seed oils, and then certain foods that some other people might be, but it's like alcohol just doesn't pop into my brain right away. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But yeah, it's a severe toxin to the human body, and it needs to get rid of it. So yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. So in that 4 to 8 zone, if you are listening to this and you're like, oh wow, I think this is me. First off, I can think of a number of people in this zone. Is this something that people need to say, I have an issue with this, I need to get some help, or that's me? Or is this something that you can say, like, I think you're a gray area drinker and you need to get help? Or is it something like they just need to come to terms with by themselves and say, I need help? Like, I guess my question is, I can't think of a lot of people who would say I'm a gray area drinker because they don't know what it means, let alone say, okay, I think I need to get help. So do you think it would be advantageous to say, here are the signs and symptoms? Or do you think it's something more like people just need to say, I have an issue and I need to get help with this? Do you understand? I hope that makes sense. I'm asking.
So I think that the main thing is, so one of the questions I get asked the most is, how much were you drinking? Because people want to know, how much was I drinking? Because then that's a benchmark that they can go, oh, I don't drink as much as that, so I don't have to stop. Phew, I'm okay. And I always answer the question with, the answer is not a number, the answer is a feeling. And it's simply about asking yourself, how is alcohol making me feel? Is it starting, like, there's a tipping point, right? So when we start drinking in our teens, 20s, whatever, it's like 90% fun and 10% a bit crap, right? So we go out, we have loads of fun, we socialize, we're with our friends, we're doing all of that. And there might be a little bit of a hangover the next day, but that kind of gets written off because we've had a great night. Slowly but surely over the years, the balance starts to tip. And for me, it got to the point where it was probably 20 to 30% fun and 70 to 80% taking from me. It was ruining my sleep. I got to the point, Shana, where every time I drank, I was taking a sleeping tablet so that I didn't wake up at 2 a.m. But you can imagine how you feel in the morning when you've had a sleeping tablet and a bottle of wine. That wasn't good, right? And so it's simply about asking yourself, like, is it ruining my sleep? Am I a less version of myself the next day? Does it? The other thing that's really important to point out is that alcohol makes us really lazy. So we get a huge dopamine hit sitting on the sofa, watching Netflix and not doing anything else. And so we stop having hobbies. We stop doing things for fun. Like most of the clients I work with, and I've now supported thousands of women in that gray area to change their drinking. Most of the women I work with, we start with going, so what else do you like doing in your life? And 99% of them will sit there and say to me, I don't know. Because outside of looking after kids, going to work, running a house, exercising, doing all the day-to-day jobs, all that's left over at the end is having my evening wine, feeling utterly exhausted and depleted, sitting on the sofa, watching Netflix, and then doing the same thing the next day. And so if we're going to remove alcohol, it's not just about removing alcohol. It's about, what am I adding into my life so that I have a more fulfilled, purposeful, meaningful life where I don't have to numb out with alcohol every evening. So the first question to ask yourself is, what do I love doing outside of drinking? What's in my toolkit to make me feel less stressed and anxious outside of drinking? Am I noticing that I make rules around my drinking and I'm always breaking them? Am I noticing that I plan around when I'm drinking next? Do I feel disappointed on a night that I've got to be the driver? Is my first thought, oh, there's no point going there? Like, just start to understand your relationship to alcohol is the first point. The second thing would then be, go onto my website. I've got a free guide on there. And I've also got a link to my Facebook community. I've got almost 15,000 women from all over the world who are sober curious, like just starting to explore what life might be like without booze. And there's lots of women in there who've given up alcohol and they're advocating, going, I thought it was going to be awful. I thought it was going to be a prison sentence. And in actual fact, it's the best thing I've ever done for myself. And so starting to change your echo chamber, because most gray area drinkers surround themselves with other gray area drinkers. So then we're in this kind of vortex of going, well, you're not that bad because you drink the same amount as I do. And so if you're saying you've got a problem, that means I've got a problem and I don't have a problem, so you don't have a problem. And so we get this false sense of security going, oh, half a bottle most nights, that's all right. That's what so-and-so down the road does, and that's what that school mum does, and that's what she does, so I can't be that bad. But for most of us, that's 2 to 3 times the amount of what is considered okay by most health standards around the world. So starting to think about changing that echo chamber. There's some brilliant books out there. There's podcasts. Like, there is a whole world for sober and sober curious women that I didn't even know existed. And it's like, one of my clients described it to me the other day, and she said, it's like I've gone from living in black and white to living in color. And that's such a brilliant way of describing it, because that is what it's like.
Yeah. So the first steps are really just identifying your relationship with alcohol. And then there's many resources that we can find on your website. And then are there supplements? I know that you mentioned GABA as one that might be helpful. Are there other supplements that, as you're working through trying to break away from alcohol, that are recommended?
I would never just do a blanket recommendation. I work with clients one-on-one, and I do a neurotransmitter assessment with them to see if they're deficient in GABA. 80% of my clients are, which makes sense as to why we crave alcohol, because it causes a huge GABA surge. So if we're deficient in GABA, we need to start finding ways to replenish it, and that's through certain foods, lifestyle choices, and supplements. But also, if we're removing alcohol, and there's definitely supplements we can take. Magnesium, for example, is the mineral that most people in the Western world are hugely deficient in, because when we're stressed, we just chew through that magnesium level. And so taking magnesium, taking vitamin C, like there's lots that we can start to do to support our health. But then it's also about starting to look at our lifestyle. Well, what can I do differently? If my whole social life revolves around getting drunk, what are the other things I'm going to start adding in, so I still have a social life and I don't feel like I'm missing out? But it's not just so-and-so's garden drinking champagne, or that pub or that restaurant getting drunk with everyone. Like, we have to be intentional with making changes so that we start creating a life that still has meaning, still has social side to it, still has a sense of fulfillment and joy, but it's not about drinking.
You've certainly given us a lot to think about over the last hour. Tell us what kind of resources you offer. I believe you do some one-on-one coaching. You do have some courses, if I'm not mistaken, or a challenge of some sort. Tell us a little bit about those and where to find you.
Yeah, so my alcohol-free challenges have kind of become incredible resources for women. So they're women only. It's a 30-day program. I run it 4 times a year. So January, April, July, October. And it's bringing women together in a safe place to guide them and support them to take a month off alcohol. And I just always say to everyone, just take a month off and see how you feel. Doesn't have to be about saying it's forever, but most people have never taken that long a break from alcohol to even know how they'll feel without it. And if you can't take a month off, then you've definitely got a problem. Like, do you know what I mean? Like if we sit there and go, oh, there's no way I could take a month off, then we probably need to more than anyone, because that's showing that we've got to that level. Taking a month off, I make it fun. It's highly interactive. I just, my January challenge, we had women from America, Canada, the UK, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. There were 650 women that all came together. We supported, we connected, we shared every day. I do a video that talks about different aspects of supporting you to take a month off booze. And then at the end, we sit there and go, okay, so how's my life different? What have I gained from taking a month off? Because if we take a month off and we just look at what we're missing out on, and we sit at home every day counting down the days going, well, this is rubbish, this is terrible, crossing off until we get to the last day and then we go and get absolutely smashed, then nothing has changed. Whereas if we take a month off and we look at, well, what am I adding in? What do I love doing in the evening now that I'm not drunk every night? How do I feel getting up at 6 a.m. and going to the gym because I'm not hungover? What does it feel like to have a whole Saturday stretch out in front of me to play with the kids and do stuff without a single bit of anxiety holding me back? Like, we start to get curious about how we feel when we take this month off. So those programs run, I'd love for any of your listeners to join 4 times a year. And then I do group coaching, a program called Rediscovering Me, which is, well, who the hell am I if I don't drink anymore? And that's a deep dive of self-discovery into who we really are at that deeper core level.
I love that. I love the work that you're doing. You are offering women a lot of hope around this topic and issue. And even if they haven't discovered that they have an issue, maybe now after listening to this, they're kind of second guessing their relationship with alcohol a little bit and thinking how, like you said, like things could be better on the other side. And let's look at the positives and what we're gaining rather than what we're taking away. So we will link all of your contact information and your resources in the show notes, and hopefully get you some people into your challenge, and love everything that you're doing and appreciate you coming on for an interview.
Thanks so much for having me.